at I/O where we talked about how to get your app noticed in Drive. And during that talk, we went over a few things. A lot of this talking about the opportunity behind Drive, as well as a few tips for how your app can stand out among all the apps that are integrated. I don't want to repeat too much of that. I want to go into a few things in a little bit more detail than we didn't have time to go to during that talk. But for those who haven't yet seen it, I would suggest going later on, go and try to watch that session online. You can find it on YouTube or link to offdevelopers.google.com. So there are a few things that I focused on during the talk on how to get your app noticed that I want to show in practice and how this actually affects how an app appears to a user. And to do that, I'm going to take a look at one of our sample apps. This is the RealTime Cube. It's a demo app that we used when we launched the RealTime API, and it's a simple 3D cube puzzle game that you can play with your friends. So I want to show just a screenshot here of what the application looks like when it's presented to users in Drive. And you can see here, it's a little bit hard to see, and this really speaks to kind of the first problem that this app has, which is, as a user, if I see that, I'm not really going to be enticed by that. It's a screenshot of the application, which by itself isn't very interesting, and it's really hard to make out what the app is doing other than the cube. It's the only thing that's really prominent in that image, but the text is far, far, far too small to really read anything about. And likewise, if we were to actually take a look at this for real, let's take a look at the set of apps. And you can see here all the different apps here have fairly bright, fairly large font, colorful, very enticing images that really capture people's attention. So I just want to go back here, and here's the app. And actually, that's the only thing that this app shows us is just a screenshot. So not a great sales job at really enticing us to use the application. And of course, there's the text of this and everything, which in this particular case isn't that bad. But so I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at that. But do realize that this stuff is very important. And as a user, there's really no reason why I would ever want to install this application just based off that screenshot. I really want something more from that. Kind of even a little bit more surprising is that screenshot probably shouldn't have ever been approved in the first place. This really violates just about every guideline that we have for what these tiles are supposed to be, and you can see these in the Chrome Web Store documentation. But it's the text is unreadable. There's far too much white space. It's just everything about it just fails on the criteria. And this is not to fault the person who did this. It is just a demo app, but it's a good teaching lesson as well.
Was it you?
No, it was not me. I'm not going to name names, but
I think it was you.
No. I took a stab at kind of redesigning this. Fair warning, I am not a UI designer, but I do have reasonable skill with Photoshop, good enough to take a stock photo or stock image and throw on some text, and came up with something like this. So now we have something where the text is much more prominent. There's not a lot of it, just the app name, very, very short description of what this does. We're playing with people, it's collaborative, and some bright colorful cubes that catch your attention. Of course, if this were a real app, I would want to hire an actual graphics designer to do this and not just whip together something in 5 minutes with a Google search. But it's a step up, and it gives you kind of an idea for just not a huge time investment can actually make a big difference in how that app appears. And now when I'm looking at this, it's actually something that stands out, it's bright, catches my attention, and then I'm more inclined to go in and check out what that app does. So one of the other things that we talked about at the I/O talk was how the data that the app creates in Drive appears to users. And one of the things that for this application in particular, because it's a very visual application, actually let's just go over and just show you what the app does. For those who haven't played with it, just we can go here and rotate cubes around. And of course, if we had multiple people in, we'd see our collaborators up in the corner. We would see their moves if they were rotating the cube as well. It's pretty fun stuff if you like solving puzzles. And you can sit there and torture your friends or just screw with each other by undoing their moves, and you can have a lot of fun with it. But anyway, so that's it. So as you can see, there's not a lot of text. There's really not much I can search on, it's purely visual. And when we look at how this app appears, ignoring this one up in the top left, but really all we see when we're looking at the grid view for a drive is just the icon for the app, and it doesn't really tell me much about that particular game. Even if I go and click in here in the lightbox, where I get all these really nice previews, here I just get no preview. So not really useful. If I have 5 or 6 puzzles that I happen to be working on, and I want to go and find that particular one that I just, oh, you know what, I think I figured out what the moves are, I'm going to have to go and click through each one in order to find it. So one of the things you can do to make this a lot easier for users is provide a rendering of that content. So I actually kind of mocked it up a little bit earlier. But in this case, using the API, just uploading a screenshot of the API, now we can actually see the state of that cube where we last left it off. And also in here, you can see, in our thumbnail view, we could actually see that same image here as well. So again, if we have 5 or 6 games, I could actually quickly recognize what that particular game is just by glancing at the screen here. To do that, it's really easy.
So we have thumbnails there, but as you showed us, the thumbnail also appears in the preview for the...
Yeah, in fact, I would actually probably rename what that thumbnail is, because the rules for how you can create thumbnails are actually pretty generous in terms of size. You can go up to 2 megabytes of standard image formats. PNG is preferred, and you could actually do a fairly high resolution image in just that 2 megabytes. It's pretty easy to do. The only thing you have to do is just base64 encode it and update it. So I actually have here in the APIs console, this is how I was able to do it for that particular image or that particular file. Just use the APIs console to inject it. Really all we had to do was set thumbnail. You can actually zoom in a little bit here, set the MIME type, and provide the image. You're only seeing this cut off a little bit here, but you can see in the raw request, we have a really, really, really long base64. Hey, I just lost my history here. Let's go back. Oh, well, I just lost it. But basically, it's a base64 encoded image. It does need to be web-safe base64, which is the only catch. So, you do have a choice. The only difference is just how some of the symbols are encoded, like pluses and slashes and the equal signs. But it's pretty easy to go. If you don't have a web-safe base64 encoder, you can just do a quick regex and fix that. But pretty easy to inject that image. And once you do that, you get all the cool stuff. You get the grid view, you get the preview images as well. You could do the same thing for indexable text too. If this app had text, maybe we would even want to do some synthetic text in terms of maybe the game state. Is the puzzle solved or is it not solved? We could even index the move list, all the rotations, something that would be interesting. So pretty easy to do. And I want to take a little sidetrack because I had to fake this, and I planned on actually having this be a live demo, and it turns out there are some interesting issues with capturing images of CSS 3D transforms that make it impossible. So things like Phantom.js, which a lot of people use for screenshots, don't actually support those transforms. So I had to fake it here. But there's a couple issues with this that I think are worth talking about with relation to certain apps. So the RealTime API, when you have an app that uses it, you don't have an explicit save point. So it's not always clear what you should actually be snapshotting in terms of the image. In this case, I did this manually. I said, this is the point that I want to save it. But if I have a user who's making a serious move and they're playing for 5 or 10 minutes, do you wait for them to close their browser? What happens if you have multiple people in there and one person closes and the other person continues? So the idea is you don't want to necessarily update the image too often, right? Basically, you're just burn through quota. It's wasteful. And given that these are really just snapshots in a point in time to help users recognize it, you don't necessarily need to be super accurate in terms of making sure that preview is a perfect perfect representation of what the content of the file is at any point in time. So you can do things a little bit lazily, defer things. And for something like the RealTime API, a simple trick you can do, assuming that we had a way to render this on the server, would be, anytime that the file is changed, queue up some sort of event. Just send this in the server, send a timestamp, and then after some period of time, 5, 10, 15 minutes later, then you can just snapshot that file. And then if more collaborators come along, you may want to coalesce all those different modifications into one event. That way you're not burning through your quota too quickly in order to keep this stuff up to date. Really, it's important, but you don't want to necessarily kill yourself or burn through quota too quickly in order to keep this information up to date. Same thing for indexable text. You can do the same thing where you don't want to re-index on every word that somebody's typing. Just do it at some reasonable interval after there's a little bit of idleness. Because honestly, people aren't going to go back and look for that file immediately as soon as they're done editing. They're probably going to come back the next day, the next week, or so on. So just put in a little delay, and you really should be fine. But anyway, I had planned on making this all really nice and interactive until I ran into issues with capturing the actual image. But for most other applications, if you're using Canvas or something like that, it's really not that difficult to do. So those were just the two tricks. There are some things this app does right that I want to point out as well. One of the things I mentioned in the I/O talk was the importance of the OAuth screen, the importance of choosing the right scopes. This app is written to use just the fewest amount of permissions that it needs in order to work. One of the things that was a follow-up question during that talk was, if you had any stats about what the impact of choosing the right or wrong scope is. And I actually did a little bit of research into that. And it turns out that the approval rates for apps that use a very restrictive scope like drive.file is about 10% better, actually a little over 10% better than apps that request access to the user's entire drive. And so users actually do pay attention to this stuff. And it's important that when you're building your app that you don't necessarily choose the scope that's easiest, but you choose the one that's right and reflective of what your app actually needs to do. So that's just some examples of how those tips from the talk come into practice and how they affect how your app appears. We weren't able to show a lot of this in the talk, but hopefully this gives you a little bit more context for how these changes can impact how your app appears. And if you haven't seen the talk, go ahead and watch it. And of course, check back on the community, and we'll happily have discussions about any other follow-up questions that you might have. So that's it. I'm going to turn it back to Ollie.
OK, thanks, Steve. That's really interesting. So remember that, and make your apps appear useful and welcoming to users. Give them the right images, give them the right indexable text, give them the right thumbnails, and people will use your application. So that makes sense, I think, and this is how to do it. So thanks very much, Steve. Now we'll be going to our regular weekly installment of Carrie's App of the Week.
Thanks, Ali. So today I wanted to talk about a photo app called Loop Collage. And photos are really prominent in the Drive ecosystem. I think we announced last week across Drive and some of our other platforms, users get 15 gigabytes of shared storage. So photos are a great way for users to take advantage of all this storage. So let's take a look at Loop Collage. So I've already installed the app, and you can see right here in the Create interface that we've given a lot of good real estate to apps. So right here, let's select Loop Collage. And once this loads, you'll see that in the next step, I can easily add photos. And Loop has done a great job of integrating with lots of different photo platforms, including Google Drive. So when I go to Google Drive, all of my photos are ready for me to select to add to this collage. And let's select a few. I'm a huge fan of animals, as you can tell. And so we'll add the photos. And there's a lot of really fun, creative art projects that you can do with these photos. So let's select a coffee mug. And I can, once it's created, I can have fun watching all the animation. So once it's created, I can save this. Let's call it coffee mug. And then once it's saved, I can really easily save it back to my Drive folder. And then when I go to Drive, I will be able to see this right here in my Drive. And so I can open it up, and here it is. And so this is a really great integration with Drive. Now, Steve just talked about how important it is to get your app noticed inside of Drive. And I wanted to just mention one other thing that Loop could have done to have even more visibility. So a lot of users will view their photos in this nice shadow box right here. They can swipe through them. One other access point is right here in this open button. So when I have my photo loaded, I can choose to open it with certain apps. And so right here, if I click open, I can see all the connected apps I have. So this would have been this is a really easy integration for Loop. They can add it right here. So any photos that I have when I'm viewing them, I can access them directly from the Loop application by clicking here. So this is a really great integration of a photo app with Google Drive. We love to see developers creating apps for photos, and we look forward to seeing what else you guys can create. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Carrie. So yeah, I absolutely love that app. Have you used that one?
Yeah, actually, I worked with them when they were first doing it,
Cool.
and it's a really fun app to play with. Yeah, I have created my fair share of collages with it. So.
And of course, once your photos are in Drive, you can share them. You can comment on them. You can do all the cool things that Drive offers. I keep beating the drum, but this is the place where the files should be. This is where you should put them in Drive. So thanks very much for that, Carrie. And hopefully we can get in touch with Loop and ask them to.
Yeah, exactly. That's something that should be a pretty easy fix for them to do. And especially for things like opening multiple files and everything, that support is there in the API, which may not have been there when they first did the integration, but it's about time to go back and revisit.
Okay, so thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us. Join us again over the next few weeks. We're pretty excited. We're launching some stuff we've been working on for quite a long time, so please stay tuned to find out what that all is. And hopefully we'll see you next time. From Steve and from Carrie and myself, goodbye.
Bye.